Question 10 and 11 of chapter 2 are probably best addressed as one group. We can talk about some of the events, the conversation that was happening in John 3 when Nicodemus came to visit Jesus. We see that Nicodemus opened up with the opening salvo, if you like, of his discussion. Now keep in mind that it would appear that we're getting a very truncated discussion here, but nonetheless, Nicodemus came in and his opening statement or his opening concept was, you've done a lot of miracles, clearly God is with you. Now that on its own might seem like a strange beginning or some place to begin, but certainly when you read chapter 2 of John, you'll see that it's all about miracles, and so it's not so unusual at all. We see that Jesus begins to do his miracles, the Pharisees begin to demand miracles, the crowd begins to be greatly influenced by the miracles that he does. His disciples are falling into line and saying, this is amazing. And so Nicodemus comes to him and says, these miracles are amazing. And if you want to speculate on what was his underlying question, I guess it was something like, who are you? Who are you? You're clearly coming from God, so where do you fit? Because you must be someone important to be coming with this sort of authority, more authority than they'd seen from John the Baptist, for instance, and they were already questioning who John the Baptist was. So it seems likely that they're asking the same questions of Christ, and probably Nicodemus was really asking, are you the Christ? So Nicodemus came with that question about miracles, and Jesus gives you, at least in what's contained in the text, didn't respond to that question at all. More likely he was actually a bit disappointed, or he gives the impression of being a bit disappointed that Nicodemus would be so taken with miraculous signs, and he says, Nicodemus, don't you understand? You must be born again. So he switches the topic from miracles, healings, miraculous intervention in physical miracles to a spiritual miracle. He says, no, don't you understand? There is a bigger thing at work here. There is something far more important. Now, in the context, Nicodemus is a teacher of the Jews. So he is a man who's highly theologically educated. So you can see that Jesus was thinking, was hoping that he might be able to have a far deeper conversation, theological issues of a great depth with Nicodemus. So there is an element of somewhat of a disappointment of the shallowness of Nicodemus's understanding, that Nicodemus comes to talk about miracles and Jesus wants to talk about the long-awaited spiritual birth, the undivided heart, the heart of flesh. Nicodemus should have known all of these things. They're all Old Testament teachings that the heart of flesh would come. And so if Jesus had some forewarning that Nicodemus was coming, or even if there was a knock on the door and there was Nicodemus, he might immediately have expected. But you would assume that since it was a Christ, he would have had some forewarning, and he was expecting to be able to talk about some of the deep things of the faith. And so you get that exasperation in his tone as he says, if you're the teacher of the Jews and you don't understand this stuff, who is going to understand this stuff? So there's that very, it's almost a rebuke for Nicodemus. Now Nicodemus, of course, we're not saying Nicodemus was anything other than an honourable man and a spiritual man, and a man who was sticking his neck out a long way in coming and talking to Jesus. He did it after dark because it wasn't a good thing for his career, and it might have even been physically dangerous for him to do this. I do point you to the teaching of Paul that Jews look for miracles. Jews demand miracles, actually, while Greeks are looking for wisdom. And that's what you see going on here. Everyone that especially the Pharisees, are saying, well, what miracles do you show us to prove that you're a prophet from God, let alone be in the Christ, to prove that you're a prophet? And that might be a little bit shallow, but it's not unreasonable given the history that Israel had. Their greatest prophets worked miracles. You had Elijah and Elisha and Moses, and so if here's someone that's of that caliber, it would be reasonable to assume that they had miracles. But of course, there is something far deeper than miracles. And really, that's not just a problem that was relevant to Nicodemus or to the Jews of his age. You and I still have to be careful of that same discussion. What are we expecting from Christ? Are we looking for some sort of remedy to life's problems? Are you looking for him to look after my finances, or to fix up my my short leg, or whatever it is that I've got, heal me of cancer? Is that where my faith is directed? And can you hear then that Jesus might be saying to me as well as to Nicodemus, you're supposed to be a teacher of these things by now. How come you're not understanding that the priority is a new heart? The priority is preparation for the next life, not running repairs in this life. And so it's a very meaningful discussion, and it's far deeper, I think, than we sometimes recognise as we look through this. More important than miracles, love is the great command. What is the greatest commandment? Well, it's not that you be healed. It's and again, Paul says, all those things, they'll fade away, they'll be gone, but love will remain. Love, faith, and hope. But the greatest of these is love. And so it's all very consistent, and it's rather encouraging to see how consistent this message is throughout the Gospel and the Old Testament, to see that love is the greatest, and the changed heart we only love because Christ loves us. We only have a changed heart because Christ loved us, and his purpose is that we in turn love others and love God with an undivided heart. So it's a wonderful passage for that purpose, and I hope that it's as meaningful for you as it has been for me, and that you enjoy having a good discussion about it.